All right, my people, welcome back onto this channel. Well, this is another strong one reaching us. Tension as Tinubu's presidency may abruptly end tomorrow. All right, my people, the news in details. Well, with the news reaching us, it had been gathered that President Bola Tinubu-led administration may come to an abrupt end tomorrow following the landmark ruling by Judge Nancy Maldonado, the presiding judge of Northern District Court of Illinois in Chicago, which ordered Chicago State to release its academic records to Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party (PDP). Well, despite several attempts by Tinubu and his team of lawyers to sway the United States court with unnecessary objections, no-nonsense Judge Nancy Maldonado adopted all the ruling of Magistrate Judge Jeffrey Gilbert in the wee hours of today, which had earlier ordered Chicago State University to release its academic records. Well, Judge Maldonado, in what seems to be a brutal smackdown on Tinubu, gave Chicago State University until 12 p.m. on Monday to release the document and the deposition of officials of CSU completed by 5 p.m. CDT. Well, she further warned Tinubu against further appeal as the court would not entertain such. This is coming after she said on Saturday that emails from Nigerians anticipating a decision on whether or not she will order Chicago State University to release Tinubu's records was quite overwhelming. Well, Parrot Vibes reports that President Bola Tinubu had pleaded with the U.S. judge to save him from suffering severe and then irreparable damage by placing an emergency hold on the ruling of Judge Jeffrey Gilbert, who ordered for his Chicago State University record to be made available. Well, according to Tinubu, the damage he would suffer would be hard to migrate if the September 6th judgment of Judge Gilbert directing the release of his academic records to Atiku Abubakar is not delayed for possible vacation. Well, severe and an irreparable harm will be done to Tinubu if the records are released. Well, meanwhile, Mr. Tinubu's lawyer argued at an emergency appeal before Judge Nancy Maldonado of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois in Chicago. If the records are released, harm will be done and then cannot be taken back to the bottle. Well, recall that Mr. Abubakar have been seeking to obtain records of Mr. Tinubu at Chicago State University following widespread inconsistencies with the Nigerian president academic records already in the public domain. Abubakar's application was granted in a judgment issued by Mr. Gilbert, who ordered the production of the document as well as the deposition of the school's administration. Well, meanwhile, the former vice president has plotted to use the records to demonstrate Mr. Tinubu's ineligibility for president, relying on the constitutional section that disqualifies a candidate who submitted a forged certificate to the Electoral Office (INEC). Though CSU officials had insisted that Mr. Tinubu attended the school, but they have also said they couldn't authenticate his certificate under oath because they couldn't tell where he found it. However, the latest order by Judge Nancy Maldonado could possibly mark an end to President Bola Tinubu's administration from the constitutional and the normal standpoint. if his Chicago State University CSU records turns out to be forged, it is expected of him to resign immediately. Failure to do, the National Assembly will commence his impeachment process because he has committed an act of perjury. While speaking on the ruling by Judge Nancy Maldonado Osita Chidoka, a former minister of aviation, described it as a national shame. He said a forged certificate finding leaves President Tinubu in a vulnerable position morally and legally, while blaming the DSS and then other agencies for not doing their job they were created for. Chidoka noted that the reputation of Nigeria is still in tatters because of the failure of national institutions to perform due diligence no matter who is involved. He said, and I quote, "If it turns out tomorrow that our president presented a forged certificate to INEC, Nigerians will bow down their heads globally in shame. On the other hand, if it turns out that his certificate is genuine, again, our reputation as a people is still in tatters because of the failure of national institutions to perform due diligence, no matter who is involved. On both counts, it reinforces global perceptions and prejudice against Nigerians. We all bear the burden. Our fourth certificate finding leaves President Tinubu in a vulnerable position, not morally and legally, as he did not present primary and secondary certificates to INEC. Our forged CSU certificate makes him unqualified to stand for the office of president as he does not possess the minimum qualification. Well, and then according to S131D of the 1999 Constitution, as amended, of course, the next issue is the case of perjury, the presentation of false documents under oath. How INEC accepted a university degree without the qualifying certificate would continue to be a national mystery. A language in our electoral legislation to forestall such obvious infraction is required. Well, the decision of the district court and the whole proceedings is not a moment of triumphalism, but a sober moment of introspection. It is a moment when, as a nation, we ask ourselves what our national value, who or which institution should have ordered the full investigation of the questionable certificate. Well, considering that he did not present a primary or secondary certificate, should our court be concerned with the technicality of the tendering process of the CSU certificate or the disgrace and the global moral damage a forged certificate would wrought on Nigerians? Well, why did our national security system not conducted a discreet investigation and then advise the candidate and then INEC about the status of his certificate? Well, a few years ago, the DSS, in an act of institutional independence and then courage, wrote to the Senate to reject Police Commissioner Magu as EFCC chairman, not minding his nomination by a sitting president. This was based on their intelligence report of his nefarious conduct that pales into insignificance against a possible forgery case by a president. Why the silence now? Well, for me, the issue is beyond legalism. If and then that is a big if, the certificate is forged, President Tinubu should resign immediately. It is not a legal matter, but a national honor and a moral issue. If it does not, the National Assembly should do the needful to restore our dignity as our people. I also expect the Supreme Court to rise to the occasion and restore order to our electoral process. Well, if the certificate is not forged, the president should conduct a wide-ranging reorganization of our national security system for failure to save the country from the needless embarrassment and reputational damage. Well, on either account, the National Assembly should start a constitutional amendment process to end all election judicial challenges before the assumption of office of all elected persons at all levels. Well, a reform of the judiciary to introduce an automated case assignment system, the introduction of a transparent process for requirement of judges, and the public display of evaluation of judges' performance annually using the agreed framework to increase public oversight of judicial officers and then improve the administration of injustice. The growing unamity in arriving at decision in our court is disturbing. Well, the bold challenge of President Tinubu by H.E. Abubakar Atiku in the US is the most prominent sign of state failure. It is depressing, but maybe it is an inflection point to alter the character of the Nigerians. All right, my brother, my sister, this is another strong one reaching us. This is so serious. Tension as Tinubu's presidency may abruptly end tomorrow. Well, a lot of people are still of that opinion that if Nigeria is actually working by now, the president should have resigned humbly. Well, meanwhile, let's get to see what a lot are actually still talking about. Well, I wish we could have change of government, and then my prayer is military to take over from Tinubu, as his government is the worst we ever had in the history of this country. That's serious. Well, meanwhile, my brother, my sister, a lot have been said onto this one. Let me have your own take, my people, on this, and remember to subscribe for more updates if you are just joining us on this channel for the first time. All right, thanks and God bless.